Alligator Energy, the uranium-focused explorer, which was a viewer request on the call recently, has been running hot off the sector tailwinds. To take us through what's next for the company, CEO Greg Hall joins us in studio now. Greg, nice to see you again. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Nadine. Hello, Andrew.
So the most recent share price, a surge, let's call it that we saw was just about a week ago when we had results coming through from the Samphire, I think that's how you say it, project. So walk us through what was found and what got the market all hot under the collar.
All right. Now, we acquired this project 18 months ago. It's an older project, never developed, but we've done our first drilling program. We've done some modern work on the results to make sure that they're accurate, because we're going to enhance the resource to an indicated resource. And the results have come out very well. There's some very interesting high-grade horizons in the project, which we now need to pull together and integrate with all the historical results. But yeah, it's some great results, and we're very pleased with them.
Okay, so it sounds like it's data-based as well.
Oh, very much so, yeah. As you work towards a resource which is mineable and you're going to do studies and calculations on it, you've got to make sure the integrity of the resource is right, and that's what we've been spending our time doing. We've got more work to do there, but we're pleased with progress so far, and we have a number of next steps. We're enhancing the resource to an indicated status, which is one you can do studies on and announce the studies. We've got metallurgical testing on some of the core results coming through, and as we pull that together around mid-year, early third quarter, we'll have a scoping study which will have the first economic parameters for the project.
It does seem to be very much a question of timing, just as far as uranium is concerned at this point. Difficult to know where we're in the cycle, given obviously what's going on geopolitically and whether there will be a renewed push as far as nuclear energy is concerned. Is it a point of how you get your timing right when you're trying to bring this online?
Well, partly, but it's been changing for some years. 7 or 8 years ago, the supply-demand fundamentals for nuclear started to change. The supply dropped, the rate of nuclear power generation was constant, and in fact still growing, and so that started to change. Then you had some policy direction changes in 2020 by major governments saying, we're not going to phase out nuclear. This is important for greenhouse emissions reduction in the future. We're going to start to integrate modern nuclear into the mix of energies going forward. And then, of course, you had some spot buying by major funds, investment funds, buying the spot uranium on the market, which reduced the supply further and meant that some of the nuclear utility groups in the world are coming out for new long-term contracts. And then the other aspect is, of course, the current situation in Ukraine between Russia and the US in particular. So about 30% of the US's enriched uranium product, the product that's used to make the fuel rods, comes from Russia. So therefore, there is a real supply-demand shift occurring as utilities start to diminish their uptake of that Russian material and look for new sources. And that's driving up the uranium, which is the first principles product for that fuel. So it's a very, very dynamic situation, but the fundamentals have been changing for about 7 or 8 years.
And that's why you're pushing ahead with all this exploration work, all the drilling, everything that goes along with it. It's interesting because there's a number of players in the Australian market that are working on projects. What is it about Alligator Energy's project or management or strategy? And I'm putting it in blunt terms that as an investor, I would choose to put my dollars with Alligator Energy.
Okay, well, we've got a very experienced team. I've been in the nuclear uranium business for 40 years. Board members, some of them have. We now have a very experienced Chief Operating Officer who has run the style of mines that we're starting to develop forward. So she has been a senior manager at a similar operation. And we have very experienced uranium geologists who are putting this data together for us. Recruitment of skilled people is a bit of a struggle. You need to take time and do it properly and get the right people in. But we're already doing that. So we have a very good team. The resource we have is small, but the grades are looking very interesting. And the style of mining, this in situ recovery type mining, is the cheapest style in the world to run. So it's very attractive.
Greg, just briefly, political risks here at home. Just had a change of government in South Australia where your Samphire project is. What is the potential there? They're going to change policy, and also, of course, federally we could have a change of government too.
No, that's correct. So both major parties in South Australia have pro-uranium policies. They've both approved uranium projects in South Australia. There's 4 approved uranium projects there which have all operated. And similarly federally, both parties now have approved uranium projects. In fact, the last project approved in South Australia was approved by a Labor Environment Minister. So there's not the same issues in South Australia as there are in some other states. It's been a continuous production of uranium since about 1984 or 5. Okay.
And will we ever have a nuclear reactor here in Australia?
Well, I think the modern nuclear plants are starting to change the thinking in Australia. The small modular reactors in particular, around that 250 megawatt size, are similar size to some of the coal, modular coal plants that we have in terms of generation. So that is being looked at. Under the current government's plan for lowering emissions in energy, they have on their white paper they say they want to review the advent of small modular reactors and the commercialisation of it by the latter part of this decade. So it's already been looked at. They would be the ideal scenario because they're also small enough to go into local regions, for example, the Pilbara, or an area where there's a modern electrification occurring. That would be ideal. And I think also if we go to the advent of nuclear powered vessels, we have to change the legislation to be able to manage and maintain and oversee and monitor those sort of reactors that will come in nuclear submarines, for example. Therefore, the legislation federally has to change to allow nuclear power in the future.